All right. Hello, everyone. Just want to double check you can all see and hear me without any problems before we begin. Excellent. So I'm going to try and speak a little quieter today. The reason is that the weather has finally defeated me. It's raining, and it's raining a little too much, I think, to try and lecture outside under an umbrella as I did previously. And so I've moved into Taranga Commons. But there are others around me who might be studying or looking for some quiet time, so I'm going to try and speak as quietly as possible. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about things, that is, particulars, entities, right? Last time we talked about universals. Uh, I guess the running example was green, right? All of the um, green individuals all of the individuals that instantiate this property of greenness, they instantiate the universal, but they are themselves individual things. And we want to try and grasp the nature of these things if we can. So that's what we're going to try and do. So we're going to leave behind the various views we covered last time, like uh, strong realism, moderate realism, um, conceptualism, nominalism, etc., and look at these individual entities, which could be very large things, very small things, right? Think of the planet Earth or our sun or the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, in which our solar system is situated. It's very large things, and they're made up of smaller things. I'm a thing, but I'm made up of smaller things, like cells, right? And notice that with these examples, it can sound as if we're talking about some kind of scientific analysis of things. If we want to understand things like planets or cells, one way that we can do that is scientifically. But that's totally legitimate and very interesting. But as philosophers, that's not really what we're doing here. What we're asking are metaphysical questions about things. Think here, metaphysical as opposed to physical, as in scientific questions. So we're asking questions like, what is it for something, some particular being, to be what it is? What is it for a human being to be a human being? What is it for a single cell to be a cell? What is it for that tree over there across the way to be a tree, right? These are, if you like, you can think about them as pre-scientific questions, the kinds of questions we ask prior to or independently of the sciences. We'll also be exploring the relationship between things and their characteristics um, later on, particularly in part two of this lecture. So next week, we'll be confronted with the question of whether there is anything to a thing besides its characteristics. And we're not going to do that today. Today, we're going to talk about like substance views of objects. But next time, we'll get into bundle theory, which says that there is actually no essential nature to anything. Things are really just bundles of properties. We'll ask whether some characters or characteristics or properties are more important than other characteristics or properties when it comes to understanding what things are, and so on. So, note that our world is a world of things, of particulars, or of beings. And everything in the world, um, all these individual things seem to have their own characteristics, which are like uniquely identifying characteristics or properties. That's what the world is made up of. But that doesn't mean that um, these things are always atomic. And I don't mean that in the scientific sense. I mean that in the sense that they can't be broken down into smaller parts, right? Take my computer, for example. Um, it is a thing, right? It is an object. It is an entity, a thing that exists, but it's made up of other small parts. Um, so my computer has a hard drive, right? It has some RAM. It has its power supply. Um, if I took it apart, I could remove all of these components. I could remove the screen. I could remove the keyboard, right? I could remove all of the ports around the side. But we take the computer as a basic thing, a basic entity, even though we could decompose or deconstruct it into smaller things, right? Likewise, that tree over there, right? I could, if I was so inclined, I'm not, but if I were, I could take the tree apart. Um, I could, well, this is a rather kind of silly example, but I could remove all of the leaves one by one. I could strip it of its bark. Um, More likely, what I'm going to do is perhaps chop it down and cut it up into firewood or into lumber or something, right? I could make parts out of it. Um, but I can still take the tree as a basic entity. So it's the individual things that are basic, not types of things, like with universals. Um, my computer, the tree, me, all of you have characteristics or properties that belong to those individuals, not to the parts. So my computer only works as a computer if all of the parts are there and they're all working properly. Sure, I can take it apart, but then I don't have a computer. I just have a hard drive and some RAM and a motherboard, etc. Um, or that tree. If it were springtime, perhaps it would be blooming. And we would say that the tree is blooming, not that the branches are blooming. Right now, the trees, I'm looking at a maple tree. So the leaves are a bright red. I can say that all of the foliage has changed color. I don't make a note that every individual particular leaf on the tree has changed color. Um, so uh, that's how that is meant to work. Just hopping over to the chat here. For something to be basic or individual, does it have to be your computer or a computer? So to continue with Jaden's question, is it only an individual when it is applied uh, kind of a sense of individuality? Yeah. Um, so it doesn't have to be my computer to answer the first part of your question. It just has to be a computer or a tree or a person. Um, it's individual in the sense that it doesn't belong to some individual, just that it is an individual thing. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. So just at the bottom of slide two, there are some, um, I guess, uh, intuitive aspects to this picture that we're painting of individuals. We take individuals as basic. So if you're talking about people, it's individual persons that are basic. And sure, you can not literally, but figuratively break a human being down into smaller parts, right? Um, Organs, or on a smaller level of analysis, cells. Um, But that's not what we're interested in. If we're interested in persons, we're taking the person as basic, not not the things that make it up. Let's back over to the chat here. No, so it's not about belonging, like in the sense of property, right? So if, I don't know, you're back in ancient Greece, right? Socrates is talking with Meno. Meno brings over his attendant, who is an enslaved person, to do the geometry exercise with Socrates. Those are still three basic individual units. It's not about ownership. So the sense in which we're using the word individual just means like a single being, like this individual coffee cup, right? Um, Before I got this coffee, there was a whole sleeve of these things inside of some kind of, cup dispenser or stacked on the thing. And so there I might say, like, there's a group of them, and maybe they belong to a kind um, cup, right? But this is an individual cup, and that leads us to the second point here. Individuals, um, intuitively, we see them as being of certain kinds. So this individual cup is a kind of thing, namely a cup. I'm a kind of thing, namely a human. Um, Kinds are not strictly speaking universals. Um, but there is a sort of similarity. So, where universals exist over and above their particulars, kinds are like if you, for example, Aristotle wrote about what he called natural kinds, and these are the kinds of things that allow us to carve nature at the joints. The sort of these kinds as classes exist mind independently for Aristotle. Um, so it's not exactly the same as universals, but there's some similarities. Yeah, Yusuf, it's individual. It might not even be unique. It's just like here's an individual. Now, the other individuals are exactly like this individual, right? But this is the individual that I have here, this coffee cup, not one of the other coffee cups in the stack. Um, it's individual because it's individuated from other members of its kind, if that makes sense. Um, think of types and kinds as it use those terms interchangeably today, I would say. Um, so individuals are basic, individuals are seen as being of a certain kind. And finally, properties belong to or depend upon the individuals. So this coffee cup has certain properties. It's cylindrical, it's solid, it has volume, keeps your coffee reasonably warm and off of your hands. These are properties that belong to or depend on this individual because this is what is instantiating the properties. Now, the first view that we're going to look at, speaking of Aristotle earlier, the first view that we're going to look at is Aristotle's view. Here's, I believe, a Roman reproduction of ancient Greek marble carving of Aristotle. And in his book Categories, but elsewhere, as well, the physics and the metaphysics, etc. Aristotle tries to systemize all of the things that make up the world. And for Aristotle, individuals are what he called primary substances. Um, so the coffee cup is a primary substance. I'm a primary substance. All of you are primary substances. This, not this picture, but the actual marble statue itself is a primary substance. So, individual entities for Aristotle are all primary substances, and they underlie everything in the world. Um, they are firstly the ultimate constituents of the world. Ultimately, um, the world is made up. As I say a few slides back, the world is a world of things. Things are the ultimate constituents of the world. They make up the world. So the world is made up of lots and lots and lots and lots of primary substances. And properties depend upon these primary substances. And think back to our discussion of universals, right? Aristotle's a moderate realist, so he's going to say that the universals exist within the objects themselves. So you can't have a universal instantiated independently of an object or a primary substance. So like I say on the slide here, right? You can't have large or blue by itself. You need a large object or you need a blue object. And this would influence a lot of medieval thinkers. Um, Thomas Aquinas is one that comes to mind. Remember that Thomas Aquinas referred to Aristotle as the philosopher, right? He didn't name Aristotle according to Aristotle. Da, 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 da. No, he just said according to the philosopher, as if Aristotle was the only philosopher. Um, so, well, there are substances, and then uh, substances have attributes. So Lisa, we'll kind of we'll keep on going with this, and I think I'll be able to answer your question in the course of our discussion. But yeah, basically there are these primary substances, and they have these essential attributes on the one hand, and then accidental attributes on the other hand. And I'll say more about that in a moment. Um, Khalid says, would it be fair to say that you only have a primary substance if the thing can be described using its properties? Well, that's the question of whether there's a primary substance is just whether there is something there, right? Like I said, this is a primary substance. I'm a primary substance. Actually, let's try and come up with some examples of primary substances. Remember, primary substances are the individual entities, and these individual entities are what make up the world. So I'm sure we can come up with some primary substances quite easily. Sure, atoms. Atoms might be a primary substance. Of course, Aristotle didn't didn't know about atoms as we know them today. Although I think he would have been aware of the views of Democritus, who has an idea of atoms. I mean, but that's a radically different theory than Aristotle's. The chair that Pernille is sitting on, yes. Trees, yes. I would say, Lisa, snow, like snowflakes, right? Each one of those is like a primary substance. The individual snowflakes are all primary substances. Yeah, Natalie, your dog. Exactly. Any individual that you can think of is a primary substance. Yeah, maybe. Um, Although that's part of an individual. I guess if you're depending on what level of, we'll say, what level of analysis you're looking at. But sure, the parts of people, like toenails. So those are all primary substances. And this is a substance view that we call the substance attribute framework. Um, it's one of the fundamental ways of explaining individuals and their features that we have. One of the earliest ones. It's fundamental in that sense. Um, so, there was some talk of kinds earlier. Let's consider this idea. Consider this. Um, consider the proposal that all individuals belong to kinds, and they all have some kind of essence, which makes the individuals a member of that kind. Could you think of some examples? I need an example of some kinds of things. And what is it that makes them? What is it that causes us to say that they belong to a particular kind? No, no, no. The kinds are just kinds. They're not another type of substance, but it's a way of uh, categorizing the different substances that there are. Yeah, a mug is a kind of cup. A maple tree is a kind of tree. Yeah. So tree or cup is our kind. These are our kinds. Yeah. So under the kind cup, you could have plastic cups, glass cups, ceramic coffee mugs. You could have those thermos sort of mugs, right? Yeah, like Platonic concepts, but for Aristotle, um, they don't, there's not some form that exists over and above all of this, right? Rather, this is just a way of us categorizing the various particular entities. Like Plato might have said that there is some, form of the cup that all cups conform to, that all cups get their reality from. Aristotle's just saying no, they all cups have some essential feature which allows us to group them together. But there's no form of the cup that has more reality than all of the individual cups. So here we have some individuals with different attributes, and we place them into these particular kinds. So um, again, with cups, this is a sort of, well, actually, I guess this is like cardboard, right? Like a cardboard coffee cup. So that's an attribute. Um, but there might be ceramic coffee cups. That's a different attribute, but it's still the same kind of thing, right? So there are these different attributes that some of which might be essential for defining the kind of thing that we're dealing with. When it comes to a human, for example, a lot of philosophers have named reason as the defining characteristic, or in the language we're using here, the essential attribute of the human being. So Aristotle, Descartes, and Kant would all agree that reason is like an essential attribute for the human being. To be a human being, you need reason. So if there are two individuals that share the attribute of reason, then they each belong to the kind human. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. The attribute in the case of my coffee cup is cardboard. Oh, that's the essential attribute. But there could be accidental attributes too. So when it comes to this coffee cup, maybe the essential attribute is that it contains liquid, or it's possible that it contains liquid, right? It's got the right form. And form, remember for Aristotle, form is, remember the hylomorphism stuff, right? Form is not over and above matter. Form and matter kind of come together to give us objects. Um, so maybe the form of a cup is an essential attribute, but others are inessential, or as we call them, accidental attributes. So this cup just happens to be made out of cardboard, but it could be made out of something else, plastic, glass, ceramic, right? Um, it has a little Starbucks lady on the front, see? But it could have something else, right? This could be maybe not a coffee cup from Starbucks, but a coffee cup from Tim Hortons or Bridgehead or something, right? And so it would say Bridgehead instead of Starbucks. But that's just an accidental attribute. It doesn't make any difference in terms of its cupness, if that makes sense. Yeah, exactly, Finn. Or bring it back to the human being, right? As I mentioned on the previous slide, Aristotle, Kant, Descartes all agreed that reason is an essential attribute. Let's say, just for argument's sake, that they're right. What would be some accidental attributes then, which different people could have, which individuates them as individual people, um, and doesn't affect their status as a human? Yeah, yeah, an extra toe, hair color, skin color. Yeah, exactly. Employment. Yep. Yeah, height. Height's a good one. I mean, I could be shorter um, than I am now. Yep. Gender. Yep. Yeah, nationality is exactly right. I could be, right now, I am a relatively tall man from Canada who is a human being, but I could just as well be, a rather short woman from Australia with purple hair, um, and an extra toe. And I would still be a human being, right? None of those things change. Changing those things does not change my status as a human being. Um, so these are accidental attributes. Um, yeah, vestigial parts like an extra toe or a tail. Um, um, no, I don't think the beliefs you hold would change your status. Those would be um, accidental attributes, not essential ones. Well, Yusuf, the claim is that we're all human beings because we have the essential attribute of reason. Um, and so you can change everything else. Um, but just for the purposes of this little exercise, right? If you have reason, then you are a human. Um, doesn't matter if you have different colored hair or if you're a different height or gender. Well, Zane, that's a good question. And Aristotle, you're probably not going to like Aristotle's answer. Um, well, babies are not very rational. For Aristotle, um, the most rational people, and I guess maybe the most human, are older men. Yeah. Uh, Aristotle actually, well, qualify that. Older. Greek-speaking men were the most rational for Aristotle. Um, the women had less reason, Aristotle said. I mean, this is not something I believe, but this is something that Aristotle believed. So women had less reason, children had less reason. Slaves, right? Aristotle thought certain people were naturally inclined to be slaves because they were less rational, right? So, yeah, not gonna like it's not a good answer. But yeah, as Claire says, yeah, it's about right for the time. Um, yeah, 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 that's right, Sean. Although, your brain never really stops changing, but when you reach about the age of 25, your frontal cortex is more or less fully developed. Um, yeah, yeah. So yeah, and that would maybe be like a bit of anatomical support for what Aristotle has to say. And I think that that's probably the only thing that he's right about. Like, not the only thing, but when it comes to reason and the human being, he's right that you need to kind of get some life experience under your belt, right? That's the way he would have thought of it. Reasoning, um, and also morality is something that for Aristotle you have to practice, right? You have to use it. You have to get better at it. But the stuff about women and people naturally inclined to slavery is we can forget about that. Hmm. Yeah, perennial, and that's really probably what he has in mind. Like human beings are the kinds of being who can have reason. It doesn't mean everybody is going to be as rational as everyone else. But yeah, that's probably the best way to understand this. Uh, Good question. I don't know because Aristotle doesn't certainly doesn't approach this in terms of the brain or neurochemistry or anything like that as we would today. In fact, Aristotle didn't know what the brain was for. He suspected that it was a kind of cooling system for the body. Um, so madness, who knows? I don't think Aristotle would have suggested that madness comes from the gods, like others before him would have suggested. Um, he probably would have considered it a defect of the body. Of Diogenes the Cynic? I don't know off the top of my head. But I don't want to lose track of time here, so maybe we'll keep going, and maybe we can answer this question later about Diogenes. Probably would have thought he was a bit mad, but I don't know. Okay, so that's the substance attribute framework, right? And it helps us answer the question, what is change? Change is just a change in attributes. And if you change the essential attributes, you change the sort of thing that an individual is. So let us, for argument's sake, stipulate that my DNA is my essential attribute, right? Forget about reason and all that Aristotelian stuff. Maybe what it is that makes me who I am is my DNA, right? So if my genetic code is an essential attribute, then if you changed my DNA, then you could change the kind of thing that I am. If you changed it appropriately, I would literally cease to be human, right? You could turn me into a chimpanzee or a dolphin if you change a little bit of things in the right way. If you change a lot of my DNA, you could turn me into something completely different, like a banana. Um, so changes to an essential attribute change the kind of thing that we're dealing with. But changes to accidental attributes don't do this. Um, so, like, I could dye my hair a different color. I could shave my scruffy uh, facial hair here. Maybe I could switch from glasses to contact lenses or get that cool laser surgery, right? So I don't need glasses anymore. But I would still be a human being. And I would still be the same human being I was before. I would still be me. But if I change an essential attribute rather than an accidental one, then I would cease to be the kind of thing that I am. Make sense? Now, Aristotle, remember, we're drawing primarily from the categories here, where he tries to sort of give a hierarchy of all the different kinds of things that exist. And the hierarchy of kinds that Aristotle proposes is animals, plants, and elements, from top to bottom. So there are elements. Aristotle understood element differently than we do, of course. Um, Nowadays we think of the chemical elements, the ones you find on the periodic table, right? So hydrogen and helium and so on, all the way down to stuff like uranium. So Aristotle, he doesn't know about chemical elements. Aristotle has in mind rather um, uh, elements like earth, air, fire, and water, right? The natural elements, we'll call them. So there are those, the four natural elements, and they make everything else up, like plants and animals. So plants are another kind of primary substance, and animals are an additional kind of primary substance. For Aristotle, animal includes the human being. We are an animal with reason for Aristotle. In fact, that is what makes the human being what it is. It's an animal, but it's a special animal because it has reason. Uh, let's go to the chat. Oh, interesting. Yeah, Sean, you found a Diogenes fact. Yeah, it's yeah, he would have been aware of Diogenes because they lived at around the same time, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, one of the stories of Diogenes goes like this. Alexander the Great, who was a student of Aristotle, he's going around and he's conquering and unifying the Greek world and going on to conquer Persia. And apparently, Alexander the Great is a big fan of Diogenes. And so um, Alexander the Great rolls up. Diogenes is laying there outside of his bucket. He lives in a bucket, by the way. Um, uh, Alexander the Great says, "Hey, I'm such a big fan. Is there anything I can get for you?" And Diogenes replies, "Step aside. You're blocking the sun. This is Alexander the Great you're talking to. You know, can I get you anything? Yeah, get out of here. Like, I'm sitting here in the sun." Um, so yeah, they would have lived around the same time. Okay, so elements are like for Aristotle the building blocks. Earth, air, fire, and water. These are the building blocks of everything for Aristotle. And then you have plants. Now, this is really interesting. Plants actually have a part of soul for Aristotle. They have a nutritive soul, which is what allows for plants to grow, um, to consume nutriment, minerals from the soil, water from the soil, to make sugars via photosynthesis. Um, but that's all. Animals have a nutritive soul, so they can grow and reproduce. Um, but they also have a sensitive soul. A sensitive soul is what allows you to sense the environment and move around within it. And we as animals have both of these too, but we have something special, a rational soul. That's why we have reason. That's right. If I weren't Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes. And yeah, Diogenes is a real character. Um, yeah, if I weren't me, I'd also wish I were me. Like, what a smart ass. There's a lot of fun stories about Diogenes. Not all of them are safe for work, though. So, read about Diogenes if you want. But I think he's quite a character, and that you should read about him if you want. Yeah, very amusing. But be prepared. You're going to read some gross stuff if you go down the Diogenes rabbit hole. Okay, so hmm, everything is made up of elements. These are the basic individuals that Aristotle acknowledges in his science. But of course, we don't understand elements the same way today. Um, Elements are still somewhat basic, but we understand that there are many, many more than just four of them. Um, but for Aristotle, it's just the four. And everything is made out of these four. And then you have your plants, um, which have a nutritive soul. You have animals, which have a nutritive and sensitive soul, and humans, which have the rational soul plus the nutritive and sensitive soul. And Crumley adds another kind of substance, artifacts. So things that we make. So chairs are artifacts. This coffee cup, the computer that I'm talking to you on, these are all artifacts. But artifacts aren't just made by people. You could say that a bird's nest is an artifact, a beaver dam is an artifact, a beehive is an artifact. Anything that is made by another being is an artifact. So that's another kind of primary substance. So maybe our hierarchy would look something like the following. Well, let's go to the chat real quick. Yeah, that's right. Well, let's call them parts of soul, Lisa. Um, one thing that you've got to keep in mind, whoops, one thing that you've got to keep in mind with Aristotle is that unlike Plato, who saw the soul as, this like a spirit, right? An immortal, divine thing that is essentially you, which outlasts the body and goes off and exists with the perfect forms before eventually being re-embodied. I mean, Plato believes in metempsychosis or the transmigration of the soul. Basically, it's like reincarnation, right? So Plato thinks that we all have souls. The souls are immortal, imperishable, divine. And when the body dies, the soul takes leave of the body, exists amongst the perfect forms, and then eventually is re-embodied. And learning is really just recollection. You already have knowledge of the forms, but you've forgotten it because of the trauma of birth. And so you got to get Socrates in there to ask you the right questions and make you all confused so that he can help you birth the ideas that are already there, right? But for Aristotle, the soul isn't like that. The soul for Aristotle is the form of a living body. The form is what organizes the body. It's like I said previously, right? Like, remember we were talking about Aristotle's hylomorphism, and I said that if you took all of the stuff that makes a human being and mixed it up into a bucket, you'd just have a bucket of goo, right? What makes me a human, a living human, and not a bucket of goo, is that all the stuff I'm made out of is put together in the right way and works in the right way. That's what the soul is for Aristotle, which I think is really neat. It's a really interesting conception of what the soul is. Um, okay, so maybe our hierarchy looks something like this. Individuals belong to kinds. So all of the individual coffee cups, ceramic, plastic, cardboard, metal, etc., maybe even glass. These are all individuals and they all belong to a kind, coffee cup. And the individuals are all substances. So all those individual coffee cups would be primary substances. And they all have different attributes. It's the essential attributes that tell us what the thing is. So maybe in the case of a coffee cup, it's ability to hold coffee, to keep it warm. Whatever physical attributes enable it to do that are what make it what it is. And then there are accidental attributes which differentiate it from other members of its kind. And kinds are, you can think of like families or categories, right? We have animals, plants, artifacts, and elements. And that is basically the substance attribute framework of Aristotle. Any questions? I wonder how we're doing for time. I think we're doing pretty well. Oh, we are doing quite well, actually. Well, if there are no questions, oh, there might be a question here. Yeah, the soul, I forget Aristotle's exact words, but he says in De Anima, which is his book on the soul, he says that the soul is the form of an organized body having life potentiality within it. So it's the form. Like remember, hylomorphism. Without form, matter is just stuff. It's not anything. It's just stuff. It's just a bunch of elements. Um, and without matter, form is nothing. But form and matter come together, and then you get primary substances. And for us, our form, the form of a human being, for Aristotle, is that we've got uh, all the right parts of soul. We're alive, can consume nutrients, reproduce, grow by virtue of the fact that we're organized in such a way that we have a nutritive soul. We can sense the environment and move around within it by virtue of the sensitive soul, and we have reason by virtue of the rational soul. Okay, so here's another notion of substance. So we've looked at the substance attribute framework. Now we're going to talk about substance as substratum. William's got a question. I don't know if this is an odd question. But do we know where the word idea of soul came from? Yes. Yes. In fact, I'm teaching a whole class that kind of deals with this. So if you're in my minds and machines class, I think I've got a couple people, maybe just one person in this class who's also taking minds and machines. Let's talk about the soul briefly. The Greek word is psyche or psyche, which is, like for example, the root of the word psychology. Um, Now it means mind or soul, but originally it meant breath, like breath, like what animates you. Likewise, spirit. The word spirit is semantically similar to soul, right? And spirit comes from the Latin spiritus. And what does that mean? Breath. How's your knowledge? How's everyone's knowledge on the book of Genesis? So, what does God do in the story of creation? He's making Adam out of clay, right? So, what Adam etymologically means, man of earth, because he's in Hebrew, he's man of earth because he's made out of the clay. And then what does God do? Well, he breathes life into the clay. So, and this is really interesting across all kinds of different human cultures, all kinds of different religious traditions. The soul or the spirit is originally something like a breath of life. And maybe that's because of an association, with our own breathing. I mean, you're not going to be around long if you're not breathing. When you die, you stop breathing. In fact, in certain indigenous cultures, they believed that, upon a successful hunt, say it's a little bit cold outside, you see a little bit of breath leaving the animal. You see steam rising off of the blood, right? If you've hunted it with, a spear or something that's made the animal bleed a lot and it's cold out, you'll see steam rising. Um, and certain cultures associated this with the soul or spirit. So originally, in a lot of different cultures, soul, spirit means something like the breath of life that animates you. And over time, it comes to mean what we today call the mind. Does that make sense, William? Zane, oh, sorry. Send me a reminder email, okay? Yeah. Um, I'm less familiar with that one, Khalid, but it sounds like you're talking about the distinction between psuche and pneuma. Um, I'm less familiar with that because I mostly do Plato and Aristotle. Um, but for Plato, yeah, the psyche is what kind of takes off and continues to exist after the body dies. Um, some people also make a distinction between soul and spirit, although really I think a lot of this is just splitting hairs. The key takeaway though is that what we today think of as the soul is like what is essentially you, right? And in philosophy, same thing. The soul. gradually, like in early, like archaic days in ancient Greece, it was like the breath, the thing that made you alive. And eventually it kind of morphs into what we would call the mind. You get this in German, right? In German, the word for mind is Geist, but Geist can also mean spirit, can also mean ghost, right? A Geist is cognate with the English word ghost. Um, and ghost nowadays, I mean, Halloween is coming up. Ghost nowadays means like the spirit of a deceased person, but it used to be that it could also mean spirit. Like think of the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future from Charles Dickens's Christmas Carol, right? So yeah, fascinating stuff. Okay, I don't want to run out of time though. So substratum. Substratum is, according to Crumley, that which supports or holds together the various properties of an object. So substance is, on Aristotle's view, like I'm a substance, you're a substance, we're both primary substances. But on Locke's view, this is due to John Locke, by the way. Substance is what properties adhere to. Substance is what has the properties. Substance is what the properties inhere within. You can put it that way. So, in an essay on human understanding, Locke argues that substance, here I've misspelled it. Oh, actually, I've used a completely different word. You can ignore that. Substance is some sort of something that holds all of the properties together. So, properties, or what Locke called qualities, don't exist by themselves. Like I said earlier, right? You can't just have large or blue. You need a large object or a blue object. And for Locke, this is substratum. It's what joins all of the properties together. He says in an essay on human understanding, we accustom ourselves to suppose some substratum wherein they, the qualities, do subsist, and from which they do result, which we therefore call substance. But what is substance? Locke says it's just a supposition of he knows not what support of such qualities. So the substance is we know that it holds all the properties together, but what is it beyond that? We know not what. Um, Now, Locke's view is really interesting. It works as a criticism of Aristotle's view and also as a distinct view of substance. But it is somewhat mysterious, isn't it? The question from McKenna, what is really the difference? Yeah. In the textbook, it says for the substratum theorist, the substance as substratum is not the individual, as it is in the Aristotelian substance attribute view. So, yeah, what that means is that on the Aristotelian view, I am an individual substance and you're an individual substance. But for Locke, substance is just this kind of vague, general sort of thing. So Locke would say, I am not a primary substance, but I am made of substance, and that is what keeps all of my individual properties together. But it is somewhat mysterious, right? That's why he says, we know not what it is. I think Aristotle's view is much more clear about this, where I'm an individual substance. I'm a primary substance. This coffee cup is a primary substance. But for Locke, um, substance is just whatever holds the properties together. That's substance as substratum. Aristotle, by the way, also thought that we experienced substance directly. Um, I look at you and oh, there's a primary substance. And look, it's a human, so it has essential attributes and some accidental attributes, right? But Aristotle, or Locke, differs from Aristotle in that he thinks that substance, or rather our notion of substance, is an inference, right? So if I look at my coffee cup on the desk in front of me, Aristotle would say, um, I'm seeing the primary substance, this individual. Um, and I can say, like, okay, this particular substance is made up of certain elements and it has a certain form and et cetera, right? But for Locke, I infer the existence of substance because I don't directly perceive it. Rather, I'm looking at the cup and I see that it has certain properties, and those properties must be held together by something, and that something is substance. But I infer the existence of substance. Um, so that is substance as substratum. But what is it in general? This is kind of related to, I think, McKenna's question, right? The only sense we really have of what substance is this sort of sense of support for the properties of objects. Beyond that, we know not what substance is. Like if you think let's do like a Berkeleyan sort of exercise, right? Remember Bishop George Berkeley? If you strip away all the properties of an object, you're left with nothing. So there must not actually be objects, only ideas. Well, Locke would say if you strip away all of the properties, the colors here, the shape, uh, the properties of these solids, take all of that away. What are you left with? Substratum. You're just left with this idea of support. That's substance as substratum. You could think of this as reductionist because what we're doing is reducing our view of objects, individuals, down to just substratum and properties. So this coffee cup, this is a reductionist view because how I understand this coffee cup on this view is really just a collection of properties held together by substratum. But maybe this can help us distinguish between individuals. I have a unique substratum, so do you. But again, like Aristotle thought, we perceive substance directly. Locke doesn't. So maybe I'll walk back what I said earlier. You know, oh, my battery's running low. Oh no. Each individual has a unique substratum, but it's not directly knowable. It's inferred. I hope my laptop doesn't die. Okay, one more slide. So we'll really quickly breeze through these worries. Actually, let's see here. Only 7 minutes left of my battery. Okay. Does the substratum have any properties? No, it doesn't seem so. If it did, we'd be running into the third man problem again, right? Then we'd need another substratum to support those properties, so on and so on, ad infinitum. So substrata don't have properties. It just holds properties together. Um, so substrata can't really help us to individuate things. It's the properties that do that job, right? You can imagine if I had two identical coffee cups or two identical copies of our course text, right? They'd have identical properties. How do we differentiate them? Can we differentiate them on the basis that they exist in different places or at different times? Well, that doesn't really help because what we want is something intrinsic to the coffee cups, to the books, etc., not extrinsic in order to individuate them. And our substrata all seem to be the same. Once we strip away all the properties, I'm I'm just substrata, you're just substratum. That tree, it's kind of mysterious, right? There could be bare particulars or thin particulars, which are not things themselves that help to individuate things. But in the interest of time, I want to leave you thinking about the possibility that we could just dispose or dispense with the notion of substratum outright. And that's what we're going to look at next time. Yes, that's exactly right, Sean. So next time we're going to look at bundle theory. I don't know why my laptop is dying so fast today. Weird. So we're finishing a little bit early, but we've covered everything I wanted to cover. Next time, we're going to look at bundle theory, which dispenses with the notion of substance as substratum altogether. There is no substance, only properties, and everything is just a bundle of properties. This is due to David Hume. Well, not just David Hume, but David Hume, David Hume, the empiricist. Hey, what are you talking about? Can you perceive substance? I don't think so. Therefore, it doesn't exist, right? Typical David Hume. And then we're going to talk about some really weird, different views of beings from Alfred North Whitehead and Martin Heidegger. Those are going to be tricky. So read ahead and read those bits of the chapter more than once if you have to. Ah,